Hey friends, welcome to today's music production live stream. I'm excited to dive into a couple of live 12.1's fresh packs and new MIDI tools for the first time and show you how we can use them to create something unique. Feel free to drop your burning questions in the chat. We'll hang out, have fun, and discover new things along the way. Let me know in the comments, what are your favorite new tools, or what are you most excited to learn about? If you're ready to learn, grow, and make music, stick around. I'll explain everything as we go. So let's jump in. So let's have a little quick test of some audio levels just to make sure everything's working fine. It's a little idea I started during the week, so let's just have a little playback of this idea and make sure we've got some music happening as well on the stream. So it all looks good this end. Everything seems to be working. If you're in the stream and joining me already today and you notice anything, let me know. But all the testing this end looks good in terms, or sounds good in terms of microphone and music. So let's open up a fresh project and jump straight in. So let's have a new live set. Don't need to make any changes there. And let's drop ourselves a limiter from the audio effects on the master track so we can compensate for any levels if we need along the way, just so the audio of the music is at a decent level. So the funny thing is, originally today I was just thinking about making some music, just exploring a new idea, which is still kind of on the table. But when I opened up live, and in particular 12.1, this update that finally became public. So some weeks ago, I did a video when I was still beta testing 12.1, covering pretty comprehensively what was kind of majorly new in 12.1. Things such as, for example, the limiter that we just looked at. It's had a complete reface. It's a completely new device in a way. It has new features. It's a whole new professional level. So we had the limiter updated. We had the saturator updated as well. So it goes a little bit deeper and it's in a nice, more intuitive kind of layout, I think, when you're playing around with the saturator. So these things I've kind of already covered on the channel. I can put a link to a card here. It's a comprehensive video on the new MIDI, sorry, not just the MIDI tools, but the new devices and refacing and updating of devices, along with a pretty major device, which was the auto shift. So Ableton's version of pitch shifting, amazing. So we've now got our own built-in auto tune in 12.1. So of course we are working here in 12.1 and we're working in 12.1 Studio. So those are a few of the major changes. And then also on the instrument side, we have this brand new drum sampler, which is really interesting as well, as it kind of covers quite a lot of different things to the simpler, and particularly good for drums. But I also think creatively you can think outside the box and you don't only use it for drums, but great for putting loops and samples inside of it and messing around, particularly with this FX area. So I've kind of already covered that on the channel, as I said. So let's say that's not kind of what my focus is a bit for today, because typically with Ableton, there's lots of stuff under the hood that could be, you know, slept on or overlooked. And so I wanted to sort of use, go into those a bit and let's discover them together a bit. What can they do for our music today whilst trying to make a bit of music? And let's start with, if we open up a brand new MIDI clip on an empty MIDI track, what came in 12.1 in terms of the transform and generate tools. So if we open up the MIDI tools in 12.1, there is now in the transform section 3 new ones: Chop, Glissando, and LFO. So what are they all about? They are not in my beta testing video. They were not existing up until now. That they were existing, but I didn't cover them at that time when I did the beta testing video, but they're now here and able to be demonstrated and covered. And then I want to talk about that I also found with 12.1, as often is the case, that over in the packs section, and again, small caveat, I'm working with Ableton Live Suite here, so you will need Suite to be able to follow along with these, but Suite comes with many packs and content. Amazing, really. Instruments, presets, samples, you name it. And I was sort of surfing through here, just checking if I needed to update a few things, and I discovered there were 2 new packs in there that I hadn't previously noticed, and one of them is called Sequences, and the other one is called simply MIDI Tools by Philip Meyer. So let's see how we go for time today. If we cover everything out of what I wanted to sort of show on these developments, I think we'd be going well over a couple of hours. So let's see how deep we go. But yeah, these are things that I think really amazing. They come with Ableton Live 12.1 and with Suite, and definitely something that I think can make a big difference to your perhaps music productions, and really incredible, as I said, what Ableton Live delivers as a complete package. All right, so let's say that we start not with an empty MIDI clip. Let's say that we go and grab something like a chord progression that I've kind of already created. By the way, this is a library that I'm working on here. It's the How to Sound and Produce Like You toolbox. It's essentially all of the kind of racks and instruments and chord progressions and audio effects and loops and samples and MIDI loops that I create myself, that I'm putting together into this library, into this toolbox, and then I'm going to make that available. I haven't kind of figured out exactly quite all the logistics yet, but you would be able to have a lifetime access to this in the future for probably the price of a couple of coffees or something like that. And so I'm going to dive in here and take a chord progression from this library. Okay, so that's a preview of the chord progression. Let's drag it over onto an empty MIDI track here. Let's have something to play it back. Let's say we maybe grab the meld as an idea. Let's put our BPM up to, I don't know, I seem to be working around 128 these days, going with the trend of things speeding up a little bit. So let's say we choose that as the tempo. So nice and simple, just simple block chords that you can see here in this MIDI clip. So let's start with what on earth can we do with these new tools here, Chop, Glissando, and LFO. So let's begin with putting Chop here in the focus. Okay, and let's say that, for example, sometimes you'd like to have maybe a chord progression like this, and you're writing, let's say, progressive house or something like that, and you'd really like to chop these chords up. Now, there are new MIDI tools that you can use in Ableton already, where you can Command E and chop it to the grid that's in the background here. I'm using Command, I'm on a Mac, so if you're on a Windows or a PC, that would be Control E. So you can kind of do that based on what the grid division was, which was 16ths in this case. So we've chopped the chords up that way. But now we've got this very interesting built-in way that we can kind of chop things directly from the Chop transform tool. So what you can kind of see here a little bit, if we hover over it, we can see sets the number of parts for the chop notes. Gaps adds gap to the pattern based on the number of consecutive notes. I'm reading here, by the way, also what is coming up in the information tab. The pattern can be reversed using negative values. So let's just play around with this and see what happens. We can also add random variation to the note start times with this. So that's interesting. Note start times, the beginning of the notes. We can stretch it a bit, stretches the relative note length for the emphasized notes. And it seems we can also kind of click in here and you can see things starting to happen already, like gaps are being left. So out of the 4 parts, you can see I'm removing some of the 4 divisions or the 4 parts that it speaks of here, right? So we're splitting it into 4. So let's use Command J to put that back into, you know, solid block chords. And let's just start moving this around a bit. So let's say I want to chop it into eighths. So we could put 8 as the number here. Let's, just before we do that, we'll just select all the notes as well. Let's Command A. So now that it's automatically happening in the background. So let's say we've got eighth notes all split up there. If we start doing gaps, if we go in a forward direction, you can see we're getting this kind of behavior happening. And if we go in the other direction, we're getting this kind of behavior happening. Really quite interesting stuff. So I want to sort of go back and I want to make sure. I noticed here, yeah, I had a little bit of an issue there with a stray note. So I'm just going to reset myself all the way back to the beginning. Let's even kind of like put all the steps back in, get it back, Command J to stitch all this together. By the way, I'm kind of exploring these for the first time, so that's kind of part of what's happening here as well. So let's say that we just going to quickly redo that, just so that we start from scratch. Okay, so there's my block chords. This time I'm just going to go straight over here and I'm going to start moving things around in a moment and get things happening. So we can kind of set up this area here. Again, ideally you want to select all your chords like so. And now you can, as you can see, start splitting them up, chopping them up by different divisions. So we've got eighth notes here. If we put gaps, you can see we're getting the number of 2 it's speaking about here. So it's giving me 2 eighth notes between the notes. Really, really nice. So you could chop up the chords very, very fast here, right? And get all sorts of interesting patterns. Like, for example, there, I'm leaving the space of 3 eighth notes between each. So if we were listening to this, all right, just sorry I didn't look at the chat for a second. Good morning, Dollars House Music. How you doing? Oh my God, that feature is what I need. Yeah, it's a super sick feature. Is that in the update, even basic? I can't confirm that, but I believe so. If you would have 12, that is not in a... So if you would have 12 that you've updated to 12.1, I believe the answer should be yes, Dollars House Music, because this is not from a pack, if that makes sense. So a couple of things I wanted to show today are about downloading a pack and integrating the things from the pack. That means you would need Suite to access those packs. In this case, Chop, Glissando, and LFO, no. They are now extra transform tools. So I hope that clears that up. Pretty sure that will work 12.1, intro, standard, or Suite. It's not a download. It's just updating from 12 to 12.1. So I hope that makes sense. So let's say we stitch these back together again, if we like, or go backwards. Went backwards one too far. Let's try that again. Hopefully we didn't just, did we just crash live? I don't think so. Hopefully, yeah, we did. Okay. Well, bear with me on that. Had a couple of crashes recently in 12.1. Does seem to be something that can happen, let's say. I'm sure if it is a slight bug, that will disappear reasonably quickly. Normally Ableton get on top of those things pretty fast. So perhaps in the next update of that bug will be gone. But I have had a crash or two here or there. So do keep an eye out for that. Let's just see if we've got our output. As last week when it crashed, I lost my output. I'm just going to try that again. So let's see. Yep, so I've lost my output. So hopefully I can kind of figure that out a lot quicker this week. So I'm just going to go into... because it cuts off my output. So let's go quickly here, and this should hopefully get us back in action. Let's just see. We're going to ignore that. There we go. So we're back with audio. Let's try again. So we're in here. We're looking at the new feature in Transform called Chop. We can select it in here, and we can start once we've selected our notes, or we can dial some settings in here. So let's say we do 16ths this time. So we put 16ths as the number here, and we can go straight to transform, and there it is, all chopped up in 16ths, right? And then we could start putting gaps here. So this would be very easy to make different rhythms. So minus, as you can see, is putting gaps between the notes. And the beat division of the gaps is exactly 16ths at the moment, which is the grid, and it's also how I've split up the parts, right? So in a moment, I'll do a few examples of this. And now I'll go forwards. So you can see it's adding notes. So what does this also mean? Well, it means that, let's go back here. It would be very, very easy to do things like polyrhythms, right? Because if we copy this down, so let's make a couple of copies of this chord progression here, because we're going to work on it. Some are going to be more sort of basic, and some are going to be a little bit more advanced. So let's say this one's chopped to 16ths. Let's say we go to a new one here, and we open this one up, still chopped to 16ths. Let's say we change that, you know, we could go back. Again, you do want to make sure if you're going to change that you takes a little practice, but you want to sort of select all your notes, right? So that you can kind of, you know, go back in here, or again, maybe Command J, put everything back together, and then you can start again from scratch. The only thing with that is sometimes, yeah, I do end up with an extra note in my chord by doing it that way, I've noticed. So if I'm back here, you can see I have split the chord here. So probably the easiest way to handle that would be to go back and split it slightly different when I redo the consolidation, for example. So we'll do that in a moment so we get that right, so I can show you what I mean. But let's have another clip here. Here it is. So now I'll just Command J each section one at a time. So by that I won't run into trouble, right, like I just did. So I'm going to put it all back to the block chords, because when I was Command J'ing it a moment ago, you probably see the issue that I was getting was it was stitching together like that whole note together, which isn't actually the case. So now we're kind of back to square one here. If we're in selecting all the notes here, now we could sort of go and split this up, let's say in, you know, something like, again, eighth notes. So there's all our eighth notes, right? And right now we're working in straight notes. But let's set up a bit of a cool example here. So let's have eighth notes as the chops across the chords here. And now let's make a polyrhythm. So let's say that we go to the bottom root notes of the chords here. And on those, we're going to kind of highlight all of those notes, just like so. And now we're going to do something different. So if we go for a value of, say, 7, we would be putting, like, again, interesting, we're just getting a bit too small. So I don't want 64ths or anything like that. So I'm just going to, again, Command J those back. A little bit of a long way around, but it'll make sense in a moment. So this is just a safe way of making sure I get what I'm looking for in a moment, as I'm doing a second kind of operation here. So with these guys, now I'm going to change them, for example, to sevenths, right? So now we've got a polyrhythm going on here in the same chord progression. We've got eighth notes in the 3rd, 5th, and 7th scale degree. And on the first, or the root, we've now got 7 notes in the place of where there was 8, right? So we could go for 5. Similar problem to what I just had. So let's go back. All right, let's try it now. We can also take off auto, go down to 5 here, click auto back on, there we are. So that's another way to work around knots. I don't want to affect the other parts of my chord, right? So hopefully that's making sense to you. So now we've got quintuplets below straight 16th, straight 8th notes, should we say. So I think this gets really, really interesting, right? Let's go back, not commit that. Let's now say that we go for a bit more of a simpler polyrhythm. Let's say we go 4. Okay, so quarter notes. So now we're just balancing 4 quarter notes in the place where above we've got 8. So I think this chop feature is really, really interesting because for putting in polyrhythms, it's super easy. You can literally just pick out, you know, where you want them. And in this case, I'm trying to show you quite a cool example here where actually these chords now have different, they are polymeters, each individual chord. So the potential with this goes, you know, quite far. So let's say we take the thirds of the chords, or actually this would be the third, should I say. That's the 5th interval or scale degree. So let's say we take all of these notes here, and again we put those into Command J. Again, we just have to watch out for this last one because it wasn't joined together. So we'll duplicate that over. And now with these third intervals, again, we could do something completely different. So we could come out of here, we could say, you know, let's have 16th notes in here. And now we've sliced them up by 16th notes, right? And then we could extend this further. So I'm going to do this in sort of stages here, bit by bit by bit. So let's say here we've got something pretty unique going on here. They were block chords. They're now straight notes here, both 8s in the top part of the chord, and then straight 16ths here. And now we've got a polyrhythm, almost said it, polymeter, a polyrhythm down here because this is playing 4 against 8 and it's playing 4 against 16. If we bring 5s and 7s in there, or 9s or things like that, we can get triplets. So we could make one of these 8ths, say, triplets. So that could be a 6 or a 3, for example. So if we, again, look at that particular part of the chord and we go down here and we say, give us, you know, 3. And you can see just toggling auto on and off is kind of helping me get a little bit more closer to what I was trying to do earlier. It's just making sure that you keep what you want. You can always use Command J or Control J to consolidate things together, and then you can kind of move that around, right? And now we've got another polymeter. So let's say we just loop up that first chord for a second, just so you can hear that. So that's 3 against 4. That happens a lot in music, 16th notes against 4 quarter notes. That's nothing particularly special going on there, and the same up here. But it is a polyrhythm, but it's just the different note divisions against each other. So kick drum and hi-hats, or kick drums and claps and things, we're used to that. But this is triplets. And if we, again, consolidate that particular note there and we make it, let's bring it in, we make it 5, it's now quintuplets, right? So we now get again, if we Command J it together, sorry, wrong button, push, and we go 7 against 4. So love this chop feature. Very, very good for making polymeters very, very fast, and not only polymeters that most of us expect, but something quite unique here, because in this case, as I said, I've taken a chord and the chord is doing something different right across the board here. So now we've even got 7 here dropping to 8, right? So yeah, the sky's the limit with your creativity and imagination here. And this is the kind of thing like Ableton, we're not talking about AI here. Ableton are giving us some really cool tools to kind of open your mind and come up with something that's quite unique here that you may not think of. So let's take it up another notch. So we've got our basic 16ths here. That's just the chop, that's all that is. Similarly here, just the chops. But we've got some polymeters going on in those chops, right? But if we go back up to the 16ths, and we select everything, things can start to get a bit wild. But again, I probably want to kind of start that from zero a little bit, as I already kind of had my chops, and sometimes that can make things a bit confusing when you're doing this. So again, you could kind of go back to this kind of workflow where we sort of start. But I'm going to leave that clip alone. It's just the 16th chops. Let's work on a new one where we get a bit more creative again. So this was eighths. Just going to label it up. Polys, or polyrhythms. By the way, do say hello if you're in the chat here. Let us know how you're doing. If you've got any questions, do fire them away. I will say that generally what I'm looking at today here is a bit more kind of technical and advanced kind of stuff. It's sort of showing you a couple of the new MIDI tools that are launched with Ableton Live 12.1. We're also going to look at a couple of packs that came with it. If you are taking your first steps in Ableton Live, this is probably not the right video for you, but I do have on my, I'll put a link to it in the description. I have a free sample lesson you can download on my website that is about an hour long, taking your first steps in Ableton Live, where I hold your hand and guide you through all the right steps to do on your very first day opening the software up. That's not what we're doing here today, but you could always bookmark this video and come back to it in the future when you're looking for some inspiration and wanting to develop further, right? Push yourself further. So poly. Okay. So we've got another copy of the chords down here. It's in its block form again. Now let's get a bit more creative. So let's say with this particular one, this nice fresh one that hasn't been touched yet, we color it something a bit different. And now we're going to go in, we're going to turn off the chops. Let's say we do 16ths. So I'm going to chop it up a bit like earlier, the 16th clip, but we're going to use the gaps. So select everything. Okay, so 15 we don't want, we want 16. So there we are, back with our 16th chops. Now we can move our gaps around so we can get this nice kind of rhythm going on. And now we can start to play around with this variation a bit of the note start point. You can see some magic kind of going on there. What about if we do that, right? So again, by the way, guys, I'm just playing around with this in real time, and we're sort of going through it together. So hopefully this is helping you sort of see how you can use it as I kind of make the discoveries about what I think makes sense here, how it works, and you do at the same time as me kind of thing. So gaps. If we go to the minus direction, as I said, we're leaving the gaps in between the notes, four notes, 5 notes. So that's what the value is telling me here. And in the other direction, as I said, you're kind of adding. So once you get past, 0, which is all the 16th, then we start to add like this kind of cool behavior. So that's triplets, splitting it into 12ths, ninths, triplet rhythm, sixths, 7 septuplets, quintuplets. Love it. And it's very, very fast. As I said, you just have to get the hang a little bit of when you're turning auto off and moving things around, when you're selecting the notes, when you've decided that you want to keep what you want to keep and you sort of commit to it. That takes a bit of practice, but it's pretty much the same with all of Ableton's MIDI tools. And we can also play around with this stretch as well, I believe, but we need to sort of, you know, have some gaps, I think, for that to kind of come into play. Yeah, so I really like that feature. That's chops. I think the example here with the chords is hopefully a good one. So let's see. Let me make it kind of sound like something I'd like to use here. I think we're pretty close, to be honest. So that was one of those ones where I was starting to go into new territory, right, which I don't want. So I've kind of got myself back to one of those situations. If I start moving around, as you can see, I've kind of editing the clip in a way I don't really want. So I'm better then to kind of reset things or turn off auto and redial stuff in and then come back here and put it on, select all my notes and then work on them. So just get in the habit of that. As I said, sometimes you might have to go all the way back to, you know, consolidating everything together like you've seen me do a couple of times and then working from that point. Just as I said, sometimes it gets kind of, you get caught between what you want to commit to and what it's going to keep constantly kind of changing as in the variations, etc. So again, let me set up one of these as I want to work with today or show you the next things. So let's color it up. Let's say, for example, we turn off auto, we go 16ths, gaps 2, let's have a little note variation and we hit auto, transform, there we have. Okay, so let's say we've got that as our chop maneuver. Let's maybe color our chords something a bit brighter so you can all kind of see this a little bit easier. That's all good. So now I want to look at, in the transform category, what else came with the 12.1 update. And what also came was Glissando and LFO. So maybe we can start with the LFO. Again, we're going to end up with a few variations of this particular chord progression. So if we just have the chords as they are, block chords like so, because I think always with these kind of things, you can start to combine these tools, and that's where you end up also with really interesting results, sort of like going back to the polymeters here. This is combining different chops in different parts of the chord to give ourselves polymeters and different rhythms and changes within that one clip. So let's start with another copy of the chord progression, just really basic block chords, and let's look at firstly LFO. What does that do? So notice that in the title it says MPE, so that means that we're going to need to have an MPE capable instrument. So that's obviously a good idea, is to be working with an instrument that's going to be able to reproduce MPE. But it also means that, you know, if you've got an MPE keyboard, then you will have access to pressure and slide, right? These are the two lanes down here that belong to MPE, along with, yeah, mainly slide and pressure. So what is the LFO going to do? So if we kind of like pick on, let's say, the thirds in these block chords here, let's turn on the LFO on these block chords here, and let's push play. So the LFO is connected, as you can see here, to either pitch bend slide, or pressure. So those 3 MPE characteristics. Well, pitch bend exists in MIDI, but it also exists in MPE, and slide and pressure are unique to MIDI polyphonic expression, MPE for short, right? So what it means is we're essentially, with this default setting here, we're creating vibrato on those particular notes. We've got a pitch bend of a sine wave, and down here it's simply an LFO. So we can see we've got control over the waveform, control over customizing the shape of the waveform, control over the note rate. So it's currently set to quarter notes. The sine wave is resetting in quarter notes. The amount of semitones of the pitch. So it was at 1, so you can see we can have 0 semitones, or we can go up to an octave or down an octave, and all the way in between that, right? It defaults to 1 semitone. And then what else have we got here? We've got a little bit more adjustment down here to pitching. It's independent of the notes, so that's really interesting as well. So you can have it, this is adjusting the vibrato of the actual note. This is setting the vibrato at a completely different point in time, or like a completely different semitone amount. Really interesting. And then we've got an attack and decay here. So you can bring the LFO in slowly, gradually, and similarly you can change how it decays, so fast or slow, right? So really, really interesting. So let's play around with it a little bit. So really fast kind of sine wave here. So we're just getting a nice little bit of try the decay envelope, fading out a bit faster. And once again, similarly to chops, you can see that I'm just on one note of the chord at the moment. I'm not across the board, right? So again, you could choose to set this up so that the chords are all moving independent of each other. So the root note has its own LFO and vibrato compared to the third, compared to the fifth scale degree, etc., which is really, really interesting. So, we could move that around, right? So now it's attached to the lower note. And so similarly to the chops, we can kind of make this just a custom for the lower note. And then we could go into our third intervals. And with all of those, let's do something different. Let's have a random waveform. So crazy, really, what's possible there. That's just the using it as a vibrato for the different notes, this LFO section. Again, it could be note by note, right? So perhaps you're doing something just on this particular note only, or it could be groups of notes. Really, like, as I said, the possibilities are pretty strong here. So let's say that we do something else as well then. So if we choose the thirds again, so I've kind of undone what I just did, but now we're going to choose the thirds of these chords again. And this time, let's say that we go down here, or go in here, and we choose to put that on pressure. And now you'll see down here that my LFO for the thirds is now tweaking the pressure, that MPE value of the notes, right? How hard you're pressing on the key is now got this beautiful LFO going on. And again, we can have it changing rates. You will see also like a little dice has come up when you're using the random waveform, so you can roll the dice and let Ableton kind of change that for you, right? So you can see it kind of changing away down here. The percentage of that, you know, there's a lot of, well, that's actually changing the phase or where the waveform comes in and out, the little box here. Raising, lowering the value here. So let's say we put it in a sine wave, right? We turn off the attack, the fade in there, so we don't have any fade in. And now we've just got this sine wave on the pressure of those notes. Let's have a listen. You know, so you can again start to get real originality in the chords in terms of what's going on in here. So let's say we go backwards for a second. Changing the shape of it. Let's go for a bit faster. Right, and then we could go up here, we could say give us the slide also on that note, or in this case we could keep the pressure and then we reselect the notes. So we do a second stage to them. There we go. Get some nice movement in here. So now we've got something on the slide, something on the pressure happening here using this LFO tool built directly into the browser here, into the MIDI clip. Chavi Diaz, good afternoon, biking home. All right, ride safe, my friends. Yeah, so built-in LFO tool here, access directly in the transform tool folder in 12.1 Ableton Live. Amazing, really. Just keep in mind, like I said, that it can be independent notes, groups of notes, how you're using it, some slide, some pressure. I think that's where the creativity lives here. You can do really basic things where you just give it a little bit of vibrato, or you go into here and you have this chord progression morphing from different notes to other notes with vibrato, slide and pressure, and all those great things. So you can see I don't have an MPE controller hooked up. I don't have anything special here. I'm able to do it all in the clip and sort of simulate what would happen if I did on the slide and pressure, and also what would happen in terms of the pitch bend. So I love that. That's really, really interesting. So let's say another one of these chord progressions. I'm sure you're getting tired of it by now, but let's say that we kind of create something now that uses a little bit of everything in a moment. We'll see about how we can do that. But last but not least, so we've explored the LFO, great for adjusting pitch, bend, slide, or pressure directly in here. All the beautiful characteristics of an LFO and a bit more built in there. So what else do we have? Well, we've got Glissando, right? And Glissando is essentially pitch bend. So if we take our bottom root notes here of a brand new chord progression, and we look here at the start and the curve of the Glissando, we can essentially create, you can see this kind of line happening here, and this is going to be the bend of this note into the next note. So let's start playing around with the curve a little bit. Right, so super nice way to get your Glissando, your pitch bending of one note into the other happening again directly in the clip. Once again, it can be all independent of each other, right? So if we undo that, we could just be bending this note here. So, you know, this is where I think this gets extremely interesting. So let's turn auto off, reset the glissando for a moment to its default values, and let's say we're just looking at this note, and we turn the auto on. Now, maybe interestingly enough, let me just check that. Yeah, so you obviously need two notes to be selected together. Perhaps that wasn't obvious a moment ago when I just selected one note. It's not like I can use glissando on the individual note. It's about how that note's going to react to the note before or the note after, right? So in this case, it does make complete sense that we would be picking two notes. So if I wanted to bend from this note into there, now we're talking. Let's maybe take one of these ones that has a big jump in pitch. Let's see if we can do this note and this note. Lovely. You know, if you were building a riser or something, this could be super interesting. So for now, I'm just exploring these tools, but what we can probably do in a future stream is get stuck in and really make some great music with all these tools. But that has, you know, riser written all over it. Okay, so I'm hearing something here, so let's pick all of our notes and let's try and combine a few things here and see what we come up with. So I'm just going to hit stop, and let's say we start with a blank slate. Okay, and we're going to walk through today the tools a bit of what we've got here of those three MIDI tools, and just do something with these chords here, but incorporating all of it. So we're going to start with chop. And we're going to just turn off auto for a second, have a look what we're about to do. I'm okay with that. So I'm going to start with that. Okay, let's now maybe see if we can get in here some form of a bit of a polymeter going. Let's have on these. Let's go and join those. So we don't want that last one joined. I do love that you can join them, but yeah, Command J. Let's get back to the note view as well, so we're not in the envelopes. But sometimes you just have to watch that you're not consolidating something in a way you don't want. Okay, so let's say we chop those into 15ths. So now we've got a polymeter in our chords, and those are running on triplets, 12th notes with the gaps in between, and so we've now got this within the chords, this kind of cool interplay between those two, right? So we're using this feature where you can come up with a polymeter directly inside of there. All right, so now let's go over to our friend LFO, and let's maybe have on the top notes a bit of LFO action. Let me have a look at what we've got set up to do here. So I'm just going to reset these parameters a bit. So we've got a little bit of vibrato on those top notes. Let's maybe try a bit of glissando. And let's maybe have that happen here as well. So I'm just using Shift to select those two notes. So you can see, like, this is a way here of combining all of these things together. The chop feature, a little bit of the vibrato up the top here, the pitch bending with the glissando, and let's say that we have a bit of slide and pressure. So you can see how you can get something very original happening here with all of these tools combined, right? Let's just reset this a little bit here. So something quite random on the pressure of those lower root notes in the chords. So we've now got these block chords that are playing polymeter. They've got movement in them from the pitch vibrato on the top via the LFO, and they've got some interesting little glissando bit of action happening. So that's a little quick look at, you know, what this could do with a bit of imagination all coming together, right? How we could use them all together. I just love the chop feature. I think I'm going to use that an awful lot. And then I think the LFO and the glissando are quite interesting sort of features in their own right. I think if we were doing perhaps a bass line to go with these chords, I think the glissando would show itself really, really nicely there. So maybe we try and do that next. So let's say that we copy our chords over, we get rid of all the top notes here, and we bring all of the lower notes. Let's put them back together for a moment, like so. Let's also just check, because I don't actually need the slide anymore, or the pressure, let's say, so we could kind of remove that. So clear envelope, we'll start from scratch there. Let's get ourselves a bit of an instrument for that. Let's see what we've got. We might grab ourselves a bit of a preset. Okay. It's got a bit too much movement on already. Just something simple for now. So we'll loop this clip up. So let's say we maybe chop these a bit. I also don't like the movement of them at the moment. So we were going to fix that in a second as well. So let's say here we're going to chop them to eighths. That's why we've got a bit of an odd envelope on here on the instrument itself, so we might just remove that preset and start with a basic synth here ourselves and just make it sound the way we want it to sound. Also, the meld is completely raw, by the way, that's playing that kind of weird chord progression. So if we were just to put the 16th chops here, or this slightly more quirky one here where there's, particularly in the first chord, some real polyrhythms going on. Some of these examples I've sort of gone through as we've gone along. So this is also quite, weird and wonky and wonderful type of thing happening here. So let's see if we can get it to work a little bit better. But what I want to do is sort of get glissando happening here. So let's bring in the glissando and let's have it between these notes. Well, that's interesting. Let me just come back there a little bit. That's better. Okay, let's just go back on that for a sec. So again, what you kind of notice when you're doing this, you will need Ableton will kind of connect the two notes so that they can glissando. So you have to be aware of that, and you want to ideally choose something that has a different pitch in order for it to curve up to that pitch and work as a glissando. It's not going to make any difference if the two notes are at the same pitch. It's about bending up or bending down to a note. So to keep that in mind when you're wishing to do these kind of glissandos. Let's just sort of try this if we have two versions of this. Nearly got what I was looking for. Let's try it here and here. It's better. All right, let's get this meld sounding a little bit different to how it sounds. Got some different clips to work with here. Yeah, that sounds pretty funny with that envelope. Let's go back just to the chops for now. Let's have a look at the lowest notes of those. Maybe we'll mute those for a second, see what it sounds like. Yeah, not the best combination, that root note bass. I think I would be abandoning that as the idea. I'm happy with the melds and the chord chops, but I think the idea of trying that bass line with the glissandos isn't really working in its current shape, but we can do something about that in a little bit. So let's maybe try out something else. So this was just a bit of a messing around with the bass and trying to get some bends and glissando in. It's working, but the progression of the bass line, the way it's sort of walking up through the scale in the lower notes of this particular chord progression I chose as the example, it's not really working for my ear. So definitely would want to revisit that. But I think hopefully the idea was just to sort of get a bit of a window there of glissando and how we can access that in the clip and add these nice bends. I also thought it was kind of interesting inside of the chords, and I can hear that being used for, you know, variation, but also for kind of making rises and things like that. I think it could be really interesting. So we're going to bin that idea of that the bass line. We'll come back to that. We've got again, that one's a bit too weird since I've changed the sound of the synth. That one's still interesting. So this one is what? A little bit of vibrato. Let's just put that in there. So that's LFO. In case we're wondering what's what, that's LFO with a bit of pitch on just one note using the LFO tool. These are from the chops. So we've got 16th. Let's actually do that. We'll call it, we'll just call it chops. Next one's 8th polys. This one is a nothing clip, so we can get rid of that. By the way, I hope you're doing really good. If you are here at the live stream, do drop us a comment or let me know if you have any questions and I'll do my best to answer them. Hope you're finding this useful. This is just sort of a bit of a discovery session in the end, going in and sort of seeing what kind of came since the last video I did on Ableton Live 12.1, what else turned up on the scene. And there's some really interesting tools here, and just creatively kind of discovering how to use them, putting them into a bit of an application, and yeah, figuring it out sort of together as we go along here. So I hope you're finding it useful, and hopefully I've kind of explained what's possible. Maybe haven't nailed the perfect demo yet today, but some of these are kind of things that when you're testing stuff out, this was deliberately quite weird and wacky, as I'm just sort of going through what you could try here, where you're combining everything. So this clip here combined the chops, the LFO, and the glissando, but let's just say it needs work, right? You know, and especially since I changed the meld to sound a bit of a certain way. So I wouldn't be rushing to use that in a track at this point in time. This clip, decent again. It's just all about the chops really here and how they're working. So that would be my favorite clip, really, just for the fact that the chops and the gaps between the chops give me this really nice, you know, rhythm. So I definitely would be working with that clip for sure. The other ones would need a bit of work. So let's try something else. Let's look now at 2 packs that came new in 12.1 that I think flew under the radar a little bit. And these 2 packs are Let's open them up. We can look at them in two ways, actually. I know I put them into this inspiration folder. So one of them is called MIDI Tools by Philip Meyer. And if I right click on that pack and ask Ableton to show the default lesson, it will open over to the right here. And this pack is an extension to some of the MIDI tools we were just looking at. It comes with 3 generators and 2 transformations, and you can read all about them here, and you can go through them one at a time here, applying them and learning what they do. And you'll see there's one called polyrhythm, there's phase pattern, and these are now, when you open up an empty MIDI clip, if you download this pack and install it, so literally all you need to do is, if you're a suite owner, right, is open up Ableton, go into your browser, navigate your way down to the packs, navigate down to the very bottom of the pack section, and you should see them if you're on 12.1 and Suite. These 2 packs that I'm going to quickly look at, because I don't think I've had time to even scrape the surface on both of them. You're going to find them in available packs, and then you can just click on the arrow, download it, install it, and then they'll be showing up here in your packs, and then you can start working with them, right? And so one is MIDI Tools by Philip Meyer. I love what happens with that. And as I said, if you now open an empty MIDI clip, you will see that let's have the lesson open as well so we can combine both. So let's right click, show default lesson. So first we're looking for phase pattern. So these are the generators and these are the transformers, right? So if we look in here, now that I've downloaded the pack and installed it, if we look first, let's follow the lead over here, generators. So from 0, starting from 0, we can now see down the bottom here, we have the phase, poly, and steps, right? Stages, sorry. So there they all are here. So they can instantly generate new MIDI on top of what already happens with rhythm, seed, shape, stacks, and Euclidean, right? That's pretty cool in itself. So new generators. And then on the transform page, similarly, we've got these 2 should show up, which are retrigger and slice shuffler. So if we look for those, there they are there. Amazing. So let's look at those in a moment and go through what they're kind of better suited, what they're sort of suited to best. And then the other pack that caught my eye that I think is absolutely great as well, not that you need more of them, but maybe you do, and that is there's a pack called sequences, or sequencing, sorry. And if we right click on that, no, it is sequences. Right click on that, show default lesson. That looks like this, and there are 3 sequences involved here. So let's maybe start with the sequencer pack. Same way to get it into your Ableton workflow. Let's look at the rhythmic steps. So if we click that here, what does it tell us all about this? Rhythmic steps is a step sequencer tailored to work best with live drum racks and adapts its UX to the context of beat making. Its core strength is its ability to create ever-changing rhythms via an intuitive user interface. I'm not going to read my way through all of that. We're just going to have a play around with it and see what we can come up with. But it seems like really interesting. And as we don't have drums here, I think it could be a good thing to maybe, again, explore a little bit and see what happens with it. So let's get maybe a drum rack, of course, out of our folder over here. Maybe something I've bookmarked, something that also has more sounds in it than just drums could be cool. So this one's an interesting one, Agile Shot. So let's have that on a new MIDI track, drag it over, and then we're going to go and grab ourselves the rhythmic step sequencer. So I've kind of added it to my shortcuts. Otherwise, you'd be looking down in the packs and finding it. Let's drag and drop that there. Let's hope we don't get any crashes. We did have a crash early on, by the way, 12.1. Not on my system. I'm on a Mac M2 Silicon. Had a few crashes, so yeah, I'm sure Ableton will resolve those things. They generally do get onto it pretty fast. So if I look at this kind of quickly or intuitively as a sequencer without kind of going through all of this over here, I mean, this is a great thing that Ableton does. They have all the lessons here and explanations that you can open up on the sides here and have it, so you can go through that and follow that along. I can see that we've got this kind of drum pad for a lane So we've got 4 sequencer lanes. On each sequencer lane, so let's call this lane 1 up the top here, we've got a yellow pad selected and a blue pad. So blue pads, I believe, if I click through the different tabs that we can sequence, this would be affecting the blue pad, which is our alternative pad. That's what it's called, alt, right? So it's kind of like whatever's on the blue pad is an alternative sound to whatever's on the yellow pad. So if we look at the drum rack that we've got here, the yellow pad should be this sound down here, right? And the blue pad is this sound here. So you can move those around. You can just click in here, I think, and drag them around, right? Yeah, so I can click and move my yellow pad somewhere else. So perhaps I look for a sound first and I go to that pad, right? And make sure that's the one I selected. And then my alternate pad is going to be this one. So maybe I'll change that, or maybe I can't change the blue pad. Yeah, I can't change the blue pad in each lane. So that's interesting. So whatever's on the blue pad is whatever's on the blue pad, right? But you change it by going into the alt here and then setting some instructions for it. So I already like the kind of idea behind that. So let's say we've got this sound up here, and also my drum rack, it goes a little bit outside of 16 pads. So I'm not sure how we navigate that here, like whether this shows me a 16 grid. Maybe we can. Let's see. So what we want to do next, it's a sequencer. We've selected a pad, is come over to the right and we can see some controls here, and we can see some dice. 5-sided dice is going to do more randomization than the 2-sided dice, and the circle is going to reset the pattern. So let's say we do a 2-sided dice. So we've got some now instructions on that particular clip. Let's open up a MIDI clip. Well, we don't need a MIDI clip actually. Let's just push play, see what happens. So the first lane here of the sequencer is connected to the charts of the events happening, the charts of that pad playing. So I've just randomized that. As you can see, I can reset it. I can randomize it crazily more. So that's a lot more chance. So we've first got the chance of the event happening. Now we could roll the dice on the alternate pad, the chance of that happening, what's going to go on with that. We've then got velocity, amazing. So let's do a bit of velocity randomization. We've got slide, so MPE coming into play here again. So let's have a few, sorry, actually no, that is not MPE slide, that's note slide, where the one note will slide into the other, or the event slides into the other. That's a bit different. Roll, that should give us like little fills. So you can see here, 30-second notes, so we can choose. Really powerful. This is just the first sequencer of 3. It's pretty crazy, really. So let's go in here, let's say 16th rolls. Let's have a bit of variation on that. All right, let's hit play. There's also a timing page here, which looks quite interesting. I'm not going to sort of bother with that for the moment. Let's keep going with the basics here. So we understand how to randomize like the different steps here of the sequencer. Let's have a bit of alternate pads. See what that sounds like. We should get a snare now. Maybe not. There we go. True to form. Let's bring the snare down a bit. Maybe we'll have to do that differently to that. Let's make that a bit more than... So the next thing with a typical sequencer, so that's all really, really interesting and really cool. And we could choose different, you know, drum lanes. So we're only in lane 1, right? So, you can move the blue pad. So my mistake, look at that. So this is where we're discovering it along in real time here. So you can move the blue pad, the alternate sound, when you're selecting that lane. That does make sense. So yellow pad when you're in the chance, yellow lane of that pad happening, blue when you're in the blue lane, the alternate pad happening. So now I can choose a different sound. So let's see. I wonder if I could choose something outside of here. Let's try this one. Can I choose that? I don't think so. I don't kind of know how yet to navigate outside of the 16 pads. That may not be possible, so I'll pick something inside of here. Okay, let's have this. This is also interesting because it's a drum rack, but it doesn't just have drum sounds, right? So let's try that. Let's change the yellow pad or the blue pad. So I can do it in real time like this. That's nice. So if we're going for a bit of Aphex Twin vibes kind of here. So really enjoying this sequence, all right, in a sort of IDM kind of direction there by making the kick one of these pads that's kind of really moving around with very cool kind of sequencing here. So typically in a normal sequencer, you'll see other things such as how long is the sequence. It's currently globally 1 bar, so we could make it 2 bars long. That's cool. We've got some other things here to do with, I would say, resetting the whole sequence. So we want to be careful about that. We could also input notes with MIDI for sure. Swing, I would believe, would be over here. So if I move this value here, maybe not, we need to maybe check out what that is. You might need to look that particular bit up, but this milliseconds here, oh, here we go, offsets the timing of the sequence by the specified amount of milliseconds. So yeah, it is pushing the timing around, didn't swing it a lot, but I think this timing page here is where you can go in and maybe swing the pattern quite heavily if you wish to do that. So I wanted just to sort of say that globally we're in 2 bars now, but here above this particular lane, we've got 16, and that is how many steps are part of this sequence. So for example, we could drag that down, right, as you can see, and now we're just choosing 5 or 6 steps of that yellow pad playing. So that's going to give us a different kind of rhythm as well. And what can we go up to? Just up to 16. Okay, fair enough. So let's make that an odd number. So that should be interesting because that's going to work more like a polymeter. It's going to trigger in odd timing. Or we do that with the other sample. Okay, let's bring in another lane. So let's have our first pad in the second lane. What are we going to choose? Let's have a hi-hat. So where is that? It's pretty much in the right spot already. Let's roll the dice again. Get some velocity on this one. And where these sequences get really deep is everything I'm doing in terms of what I did a moment ago on the first lane. Let's go back to that. When I change the step length right here of the alternative pad, you can change the step length for all of these different sections. Amazing. So deep sequences, again, we're looking today at things that have a lot of depth to them. This first sequencer, we're just looking at the very first one here, can really be deep in terms of what it's doing already. Super nice that it works with the drum rack. This is going to be great for coming up with, again, fast ways of sequencing drum racks. Really like this main pad, alternative pad thing that we've got going on here. So let's get to our second lane. down here. You just have to, I guess, watch a little bit how to pick each lane. Maybe you can choose it over here so you don't kind of swap things around here. Not quite sure how to do that easily yet. Maybe it is over here instead of, because here I'm clicking a lot of the times and I'm changing amounts and different sounds on different pads. So let's look at the alternative sounds here for this one. Let's also just bring that hi-hat sound out a little bit. And actually, I did it by accident, but I just clicked on something which wants to hot swap that drum rack out. So that would be kind of interesting, right? Because we could actually leave the sequence as it is and switch the whole drum rack out. Let's try that. Hopefully we don't crash here, but this could be interesting actually to see what happens there, because of course the pads are going to be all different now. Yeah, so that was kind of a cool little happy accident that just happened there, in the sense that just while I was messing around with that drum rack, I clicked on hot swapping it. And so, yeah, you can actually get stuck in here and, of course, you know, switch the drum rack out and all of the sequencing kind of stays put. And you're attaching it to a whole new drum rack, the sequence. So let's try this one. Yeah, so interesting stuff, like really, again, a lot of depth there. So I'm really enjoying this rhythm, the first one of the sequences from this sequencer pack by Ableton, coming in 12.1. Lots and lots of potential here. I'm going to put it back to the Agile Shot drum kit. That was the one that was kind of sounding, I guess, at least closer. It's going to be a little bit loud now, so we'll need to bring down some of the levels on some of the sounds. So let's just close up a few things here so we can see that. Let's maybe go to the first one again, try out. Yeah, so that's rhythm. What else do we have here? We have the step up, an advanced pattern-based MIDI arpeggiator. It can sort, repeat, and transpose incoming MIDI note patterns in various ways while controlling a number of other parameters. So very tasty looking kind of arpeggiator sequencer. That's another part of this collection here, of this pack. What else do we have then? Let's go back to the first page. The SQ sequencer. classic style step sequencer to generate MIDI patterns and offers 1 to 16 steps in an easy way to use interface. Use it with Ableton synths and samplers or any other MIDI capable device. Let's maybe have a quick little look at that one. See if we can roll up a bass line with that. So we're going to pop over to Inspiration, head over to the SQ, let's drop it in. So, you know, that rhythmic steps definitely got to be all of over that synth, that particular device. I can see plenty of uses for that. Loving the interface, seems pretty straightforward to work your way around, and I haven't even used 2 lanes of the sequencer yet, and as I said, it goes mega deep. So I think what I would do is have another drum rack, another different rack, put that in front of it, and then we would have something cool as a result of that. Right now, got this kind of interesting little idea. I'm going to just change that pad back to the kick, just so we've got a kick. Yep, that makes kind of more musical sense now, the way it's set up. So then let's have a look at the SQ synth sequencer, as it's known. Let's grab ourselves a bassline synthesizer, perhaps something from Ableton's preset library, just to get ourselves rolling. Let's have this guy. Okay, so what are you looking at with this sequencer? Let's have a look. What have we got? We've got 8 steps happening up here in the very kind of easy to see kind of area. We've got the current note division of 16th notes. We can add some swing here. Interestingly, we can note sync the sequence steps, or it looks like the sequencer can be set to the BPM of your project, which is a pretty cool feature there. Looks like we can, if we're working in a key or a scale, we can basically get it to follow the global scale function in Ableton Live 12, so that's kind of pretty cool. Otherwise, here we can set keys and scales for the sequencer to work in. So right now we do have some MIDI or chord progression, which is kind of, let me just check what kind of scale we're in. I think we're in a white note scale. Let's just check that. No, we do have a G sharp 1 in there, but that could be, just out of interest, a little bit of variation to that. So it's a non-scale note. I don't think it's going to cause us too many problems, so we can probably just leave that as showing C major up the top. So let's see, so if we push play, now we can start to work on our sequence a bit. Let's have a 16-step sequencer. Let's say that we roll the dice on the velocity to start with. Note length as well. And now we can try the pitch. And let's get a bit of a scale. So once again, you've got your sort of basic kind of typical scale things here: pitch, octave, velocity, length. We've got all sorts of interesting kind of divisions to do with each step here, like values showing up here. And what I was doing was just rolling the dice of those values, but it looks like you can like manually change them. So that reset it to 0 or 1, or you can manually draw in the different values for pitch, for example, or you can roll the dice here, or you can lock that so that it wouldn't be able to be changed. So let's say we reset that for a second, so you can lock it here. That's kind of locking it out to whatever it's currently set to. That's a pretty cool feature. I'm guessing we could turn off the steps up here, as you can see. So we can turn them off that way. So we could see 16 steps, but only have 8. And I'm kind of imagining up here, this is global, right? That's the whole sequence. But over here, individually, you can drag up and down. Now the pitch has 16 steps, so again you can set that to its own custom length, all of these different lanes. That's great. And also we've got an extra feature here. We can go forwards, backwards, alternating. sync and not sure what that is, and then random. So that looks pretty cool. So you can have different directions on these. Again, these sequences really deep for getting something kind of quite interesting going. So let's try a little bit of different direction here. So the clock, it's following Ableton Live's clock at this point, so it seems you can also have it doing some interesting options within the clock section of it. So let's again maybe switch out the synth here for a blank canvas. Sounds to me like it's currently a little bit up in pitch, so we might want to bring it down if we're going to turn this into a bass line, a bass synth, but it sounds like it right now it would make a pretty cool acid line. So let's maybe take this pitch and tone it down a bit. So I'm just going through the different sections down here, so you can kind of roll this dice, or you can kind of work on this other area here, which is also randomizing it in different values, or you can reset by clicking in there to zero it out, and you're back to no octave change or no pitch change if you zero those things out. Rolling the dice, locking it in place, and then I'm changing also here the length of the sequence over on the right here of those individual elements. So I was kind of making short 5-note sequences, so you kind of effectively what we actually have is we're only listening to those 5 steps like so. So I'll do it globally. Now we're just looking at a 5-step sequence. But the interesting thing is it's still okay, so maybe we just want to bring it down here, and then we can also, yeah, there we go, turn it into a 5-note sequence here. So now, yeah, so let's say 7. Forward and backwards. The octave is going in a random direction. So again, a lot of depth with this one as well. The little keypad here, I'm guessing you can, yeah, shift the sequence left or right or up or down. Well, that's sounding quite nice in a kind of melodic type direction. Don't know if it was going to work with our chords from earlier, but it's kind of working on its own quite comfortably. So we might as well make a little bit of music with this sequence. It's kind of inspiring me to work on the synth a little bit and get that sounding a bit nicer. But now we've got this kind of melodic kind of sequence going on from it, and it's in an interesting like 7-step pattern with a bit of kind of pretty cool stuff going on over here. I've linked it up to C major being the current scale up here. Let's say then if we change this to A minor, yeah, it should be that is paying attention to that, which it has. It's obviously changed it down here to, so let's try something a bit further away. So yeah, so we can hear it's definitely being altered by that, which is great. So let's say B minor. So sticking with the Aphex Twin-ish vibes here a little bit. Look at this sequence with this analog. Let's process the analog a little bit. You know, sometimes it just takes one sound just to sort of trigger you a little bit into a pathway. So I'm following that. So now the drum rack with this really cool rhythmic step sequencer working away, and the analog. I think we've got something kind of cool happening here. So let's see if we can get the third sequencer in and see what we can discover from that one. And the chord track, well, it's not really part of this music anymore in a way. It was sort of kicking off the demonstration of chops, glissando, and LFO. So if you joined the stream a little bit later, like now, you want to go back and check out the front end of today's stream where I've sort of gone through those new transformation tools that particularly I use the chord progression as an example of putting those into action, chopping up the chords, bit of glissando, bending from note to note, and the LFO as well, and using that. So that was really just to give us an example of what might kind of be an application for some of those tools and walk our way through it. Again, I'm sort of discovering this kind of in real time with you guys. They caught my eye as I was going through, I don't know, working on some new music. I saw, wow, there's a couple of new packs. I haven't seen how they work. And I also saw those tools pop up in 12.1 and thought, wow, the new MIDI tools, I need to kind of understand those. So I'm going to put the meld out now. We've got a little idea that's musical going on. Let's try another sequencer then from this lovely pack. So I've kind of tagged it in one of my collections. So the one we haven't used yet, and again, let's bring up the lessons so we can see it over here, is the SQ we've just been working with. Really nice. Again, very deep. We've used the rhythmical one, which is built for the drums. So let's get back to page 1. So the one we haven't used is this step up. So let's have a look at that and see if we can figure out what it can do. Put it through its paces, see if we can come up with something else here. By the way, if you are here in the stream, we're getting down to the last sort of 50 minutes of today's stream. Do say hello. Do drop any questions you might have in the chat. Hope you're finding this beneficial, taking some things away, watching me fumble my way through some of these things. Well, it's in real time and I'm discovering them at the same time as you, but hopefully I'm able to help you sort of work your way around the different controls and how you can kind of use them best. All right, so let's put a wavetable perhaps here. So here we don't have anything just yet. Sometimes we need to activate some steps. So let's turn that off for a second. Here we have our drums. So if we just take a quick look around again, what have we got going on here? We've got a beat division of 16th notes. We've got note syncing again up here, so we can sync it to B minor I had a moment ago. So let's put that back up there. We can sync it to the pay attention to the scale awareness feature. We've got BPM again, we've got note sync, we've got swing down here, we've got octaves, up, down, moving the pattern around, rolling the dice on the pattern. Some interesting kind of looking controls along the top here. So we can move the octaves up and down, we can randomize the octaves up here, then we can go across note order, play up as played, up, down, chord, random, follow. Okay. This one's more an arpeggio. Again, I'd advise you to read through all of this beautiful content Ableton gives us over here in the lesson side on the right-hand panel, but I'm kind of ignoring that just in the stream to see if we can get something going. Okay, note order. All right, holding the current sequence, resets. Okay, what have we got here? Find the range to randomize the velocity. Okay. So that would be the velocity lane then. So let's say we do that one already. Then if we click note length, so a bit of randomization in there. Note chance, we need to switch that on. I think we'd now have a sequence. Not yet. Okay, let's see with this one. Let's feed it a MIDI node of some sort, see what happens. And let's get that MIDI note legato. So yeah, I was suspecting that this wasn't producing any sound just yet, as it's more like a arpeggio, as it speaks about over here. The step up is an advanced pattern-based MIDI arpeggio that can sort, repeat, and transpose incoming MIDI note patterns in various ways while controlling a number of other parameters. So you kind of want to be feeding this some different kind of notes coming in here. So if we're in B minor, and we do a quick little chord progression here. Let's feed it a bit of information. So let's do the 1 chord. Let's maybe do the 4 chord, the 6, and then we can come back to the 1 perhaps. Let's add some scale degrees. And let's voice this a little bit better. And now we can sort of take a look through the sequence a little bit. So let's maybe reset it to a starting point, because we didn't have the chords in the beginning, which kind of was hurting us a little bit here. So let's say we just reset the sequencer a bit to a fresh one. Okay, we'll get rid of this one. So you can hear it's arpeggiating those chords, right? They are not an arpeggio at this point in time. They're down here, just block chords in the MIDI clip that I wrote just a second ago. So now we're getting... Let's see what we can do when we sort of work our way through it. So velocity is the first lane that's selected here. As you can see, you can work your way down through the different sections. So velocity, let's randomize that. Let's go to note length next. Let's maybe have a few less steps. So it's different to the velocity. Chance. Try a bit of ratchet. So you could do that. I wasn't sure how to reset it things yet, so I just kind of played around there by bringing it to the bottom. Okay, let's stop that for a second so it doesn't sound awful. And let's see, there must be a way to obviously reset it. However, I don't kind of see that just yet. So we can transpose the pattern up and down. We can ratchet so we get little fills, which is what happening a second ago. We've got the chance now of events happening, the length and the velocity. This seems to be global. The number of steps wasn't lane by lane, which I was thinking it was a moment ago. We've got this dice rolling over here, which randomizes the steps individually. So that was giving my randomization. So what else can we do? Can move octaves up and down over there. I can randomize that. note order played up, down, etc. Okay, so that should sound quite interesting. Yeah, so this is changing kind of how it's arpeggiating the notes. Which is interesting. So that's a pretty cool little sequencer for getting an arpeggiated pattern of the chords going pretty quickly. I mean, there are many ways to do that, but it's sort of interesting what's going on so far. We've also got a map CC here, which is always kind of, I like when I see that in a sequencer. Generally, that means that I can map a sequence to something on the instrument itself. So we could try mapping that to filter frequency and bring the frequency down a bit and now randomize that. So yeah, a lot to do with the slider here and then the dice for the randomization part. And as you can see, you can kind of draw as well. Down the bottom, yeah, you can remove all the triggers. So that's possibly how you do it lane by lane. Let's try that. So yeah, that's how you do that. Right, now I figured that out. So that's how we get a certain number of steps in each of the individual sections. Oh no, again, it's global. I can see it's grayed out all of them. Okay, so I haven't quite figured that out yet. How we could perhaps, I mean, just have this as a 5-step sequence only or a 7, but I'm sure that's possible. Just haven't sort of seen where that happens just yet in the device, but kind of liking it so far. The map CC, that's great. So if we turn that off now, map it to something else, let's map it to the wavetable, moving through the wavetable, and let's then have some kind of other style of wavetable that's a bit more interesting than the basic shapes. So let's choose something like complex maybe. Come back to our drum rack and our drum. Let maybe get another sound rolling here. Another sequence. Yeah, so I'm liking this step up sequencer. It seems really quite interesting. Let's give it some more notes. So let's add the sevenths to these B minor chords. And let's give it some more notes. On the ninths. Yeah, so interesting sequence from that. Here's the other sequence. Now they weren't built to work together, let's say. We've just been exploring how the SQ sequencer works. And now we've been exploring. They don't really. They're not a perfect match made in heaven, so we kind of decide which one we want to keep and then work around that. But it's been more about exploring the sequences themselves. I think the wavetail was quite pretty with the drum. I really like this rhythmic step sequencer. It's very, very cool. So what's left on the table here with this exploration today? Well, believe it or not, quite a lot. If we come back into the other pack that I installed, coming again with Ableton Live 12.1 Suite, the other pack that I think is super inspirational that I saw pop up in there and thought to explore it today in real time, take a look around it, is this MIDI Tools by Philip Meyer. So if we put that into the default lesson, we've got these generators and transformations. So if we take a very short tour of those, if we go to the Generate tab, we can pop into here and we can see phase pattern. So if we click that, we bring up this kind of display over here. And what does it tell us a little bit? Pattern, pitch, velocity. So notes of C3, pattern here. So if we just sort of say generate and then we start playing around with it, you can see here, this could be very interesting for sort of like exponential rhythms as they're known. So like, again, if we're doing a snare roll or some sort of build here, we can get to really nice different timing by moving this pattern curve around. And of course, and stretch it in all sorts of beautiful shapes here. So let's maybe grab a little bit of a sound for this. Let's try one of those perhaps. Yeah, crazy stuff. So again, this could be very, very interesting to get like an exponential rhythm. As I said, you can start with something super basic. So if I change my grids around, yeah, really, really interesting in terms of what you could do to the notes here and what you can play around with once you've got the notes in there, in terms of sort of stretching them elastically around. So here they're following the grid. We've got all 8 notes here, and then you can mess around with the pitch as well and the velocity. So if you're in this lane here, you would be potentially applying pitch changes, I would imagine. And velocity changes. Let's have a quick look down there as well. So back here. Well, I need to spend a little more time in that, but I like the look of that. And it covers, in theory, pattern, pitch, and velocity. What else do we have in this little box of tricks? As I said, I haven't dived into these. It was just a bit of a look at them in real time and explore them a bit. Polyrhythm probably does what it says on the tin. So we've got a bunch of different steps here, scale degrees, 0 to 5, the length of 16 steps. Okay, so let's sort of zoom this out to a bar. We kind of want to close down the loop a little bit or make it longer. So now we've got matching a number of steps. So we can kind of turn steps on and off, change the velocity of them, vary them a bit, change the length and the scale degree. We're starting on note C1. This looks like something, again, that could be really good on a drum rack of sorts. So maybe let's see what happens if we kind of start putting in the density of notes here at 5. Let's go 0. Okay. So this could be interesting for coming up with sort of like a sequence, something like that. So you can mess around directly in here with this polyrhythm concept. So this would be good with a couple of different sounds perhaps. So this looks really interesting as well. And there are a lot of options in the background there of how you distribute the notes, whether it's in Euclidean or omnidirectional. So that looks really interesting. As I said, I think I'll probably save this up for another stream, and we can dive into that whole set of these MIDI tools by Philip Meyer. Perhaps I'll get to learn them a little bit, and then we can jump in. So let's clear this away. Yeah. Start with this one. Again, we're populating notes here, stages, pitches, patterns. So all kinds of fun little tools, and these are built, again, once you've downloaded this Philip Meyer pack and installed it, they will show up in your generate and transform tools. And again, strongly advised, obviously, is to go through, you know, this lesson tab that comes up and just explore them, you know, so click on the phase pattern and then go through what it will do. And then you can then try that out over here and get some action and results kind of straight off the bat. So that's the phase pattern. The polyrhythm is there. So it explains everything you can do with it. And yeah, onwards and so forth. Same with stages. So really highly recommend those two. I mean, again, I think if you're taking your first steps in Ableton Live, there's no need to go down this potential rabbit hole. But if you're someone who's using this software for a long time and you're looking for things to refresh, inspire, you understand what you want from these tools, get them into your project and play around with them, learn them, see what they can do, because you know they really can, I think, be quite a strong set of tools to come up with your own unique and distinct sound. And that's a lot about what this channel is about, how to sound and produce like you. And so kind of what I was doing at the very start of the video with a chord progression and then chopping it and adding all these different things, multiple layers of these things together. Yeah, there's sort of a lot of potential here to come up with some really interesting and unique results. So I'm looking forward to exploring these a bit further. If you'd like to see me, go into all of these ones as well and kind of work with them and give applications like use cases, then I will go away and do my homework. I'm going to obviously learn how to use them properly anyway myself, so I can incorporate them into my workflow. But I thought it was kind of fun as well to almost like leave them like a present that hasn't been opened and open them up here and then sort of try and see if they're easy enough to navigate your way around them without sort of studying the manual, let's say. And we've done okay, particularly with the sequencers. I've spent a little bit of time with the 3 that come there in that pack. The rhythmic steps, definitely in love with this, think it's great. Really like all the possibilities that we can do across the steps and the pads here. Great that we've got something specifically for sort of drum racks that we can use. And again, you can think out the box here that you can make your own empty drum racks here and put whatever sounds you want on them. So it doesn't have to be drum one-shots. It can be loops, can be audio, can be synth sounds. Again, you can go wild, Aphex Twin-like. And then the second synthesizer, this arpeggio one, really interesting, gives you a few different options to slapping Ableton's arpeggio on here. So I quite like it. It's different, right? It's sequencing the different elements of the steps in the chords. So we've got a chord progression, then we're breaking it up into a sequence, an arpeggiated sequence, and we're able to play around with the different steps in different ways, adjusting velocity, length, chants, ratcheting, transposing, and this great feature which I love, as I said, when I can see a sequencer that allows me to map it to anything. In this case, I've mapped it to the wave, positional movement of the wavetable. So wavetable modulation over here is what I mapped. That's part of the sequence too. So you've got your own dedicated sequence that you can map to other things. And then the other sequence here, the SQ, was really cool for coming up with a bit of a sort of acidy type line here. Let's maybe just do a tiny little bit here. We can take the chords that are being arpeggiated . Have a new track. Make this sure this sequence is in B minor. Let's use chop. So you can get nice kind of fast results with that chop and get into the wonkiness pretty quickly. Copy these chops down. Yeah, so that's going to be a bit of a wrap for today. It was mainly, in the end, I was thinking to just make some music, a bit like what we've got there, like a bit of an idea cooking now. But in the end, came across those new features or new fresh packs in Ableton 12.1 and those new MIDI tools, and thought it might be nice just to sort of take a look at them in real time together, figure out how to work with them, look at some of the creative possibilities of them, and that sort of turned out to be the stream for today. So as always, I hope you did find it of benefit. I will leave a link to a video here that I'd strongly suggest you watch next. Probably a sound design would be a good topic to take a look at. Done a couple of great ones on the channel to do with that. And if you are a learner taking your first steps in live, this video probably wasn't for you. That's the truth. It was a bit of a technical deep dive look at these new tools. But if you, I'll put a link in the description. If you do head to my website, there is a free sample lesson you can download called Taking Your First Steps in Ableton Live. And there you can kind of follow that pathway in an hour and know exactly when you open it up how you should approach things. So bookmark this one if you're a beginner for the future. Come back and check it out in the future, and I'm sure it could hopefully give you some ideas and inspiration. On that note, you're very welcome, Chavidias. Thanks to you. Obviously, I'm sure you're home now, so good stuff there. Wishing you a great rest of your weekend. Take care of yourselves, and I will catch you in the next live stream next Sunday at 3 p.m. Central Eastern Standard Time, where we will be doing more and all things Ableton Live. Take care of yourself. Peace out. Ciao for now. Bye-bye. Ciao.